Everybody, Volume 7! Yes! And then the next one is Volume 8 that we have to wait for. I've already pre-ordered it, and it's going to be coming January 10th this coming year. And I cannot wait. And it is currently, the 12th? We still have 29 days till that comes out. And it probably won't even take me a couple days to get, maybe 2-3 days at most. Maybe at most 4 days, depending on, when I get done, to finish this book. This is insane. Prologue. Luggage from Ehrenfest arrived at the end of autumn, only a few days before the start of winter socializing. Back when Ferdinand had first moved to Ahrensbach, his luggage had needed to be delivered to the office, opened in the presence of several knights and scholars, then thoroughly checked for anything dangerous. Now, however, it was taken straight to his chambers as a matter of course and checked only by his retainers. He attributed that to a tension-draining letter from Rosemine. Here we have meals made with the seasonings Lady Letizia sent to Lady Rosemine, just as said as he started checking the food and the time stopper for poison. We also have some sweets for Lady Letizia and replies to the letters. Ferdinand sighed. Gifts to thank us for our thank you gifts. There's no end to this. You don't have to repay her for this one! Were he to send Rosemine something else in response, she would merely return the favor. It would never end! One of y'all has to stop. The whole experience was still new to him, so he had no idea how to escape the loop. Was she not going to ease up on these interactions now that she's getting older? May I entrust Straw with the letter and sweets for Lady Letizia? Sergius asked as the attendants began checking the letters. It seems like a good opportunity for him to gain some experience. Straw, given how many retainers Lord Giselfried used to have as the Archduke, can I assume you are rarely tasked with checking deliveries? Straw was Ahrensbach's former knight commander. During his extended service, he had seen earn the unfaltering trust of the late Giselfried, the previous Ob Ahrensbach. Oh, so that's what his name is, okay. But that meant nothing to Detlinde. After her father's death, she had dismissed Straw from her service for being too critical and irritating. He had chastised her for visiting the Lanzenhof estate on such a regular basis. I mean, considering what happened in the last volume, I can't really blame her, but why can't you just... Never mind. I was gonna say, tell the king that Ahrensbach would be better off with Ferdinand as the Archduke, and she could leave, and then they would get rid of that little headache right there. But no, that's not gonna be... That wouldn't end well, I don't think. I cannot even begin to comprehend her foolishness. Why would anyone dismiss a competent worker for such an asinine reason? Straw was far from the only victim. Detlinde had dismissed every single one of her sensible retainers, for they had all criticized her dealings with Lanzenhof. The surveillance on her had weakened ever since midsummer, and now it was much harder to stop her from slipping away. Not even Georgine had enough reach to keep the situation under control. So Georgine's having a hard time with this too. That's bad, yet at the same time good. Keep her out of control in the situation. Maybe she'll make a mistake. I hope. From what Ferdinand understood, she had even resorted to summoning Detlinde's elder sister, Alsted, who had been demoted to an archnoble to watch over her irrational daughter. Although I sympathize with Detlinde's house, one could say they are receiving their just desserts for not raising her properly. Yep. It had been with half an eye on the struggles of Ahrensbach's archducal family that Ferdinand had taken Straw into his service. The work expected of a knight commander was not quite the same as that expected of a guard knight, which occasionally caused the man some trouble. Lord Ferdinand, the letter instructs you to invite Lady Letizia to a meal and share the dish with her. Sergius said, what shall we do? We have little choice in the matter, Ferdinand replied. We can all expect to be busy once winter socializing begins. Ask whether she would care to have lunch with me before then. Sergius was the son of Letizia's head attendant, Roswitha, so he was invaluable when it came to contacting her. Straw was similarly connected to, as his daughter Fairseal was Letizia's apprentice attendant. As far as Ferdinand was concerned, it was no coincidence that the retainers whom Detlinde had dismissed, each for a trivial reason, had also been those considered most trustworthy by the previous Archduke. He could practically see the strings connecting Detlinde to her mother's manipulative hands, but his access to any meaningful intelligence had tapered off since his move to the Western Building. This has come at a good time, Eckert muttered from behind Ferdinand, speaking quietly enough that only his lord could hear. We did say that we wanted to probe Lady Letizia for information about Lanzanov. He was right. Letizia had been making frequent trips to the Lanzanov estate, ostensibly at Detlinde's invitation, but more realistically at her command. Relying on her for intelligence would mean relying on the perspective and memory of a child, but Ferdinand still considered it a good opportunity to learn more about Lanzanov's internals. Because as far as we know, Letizia is trustworthy. Not sure about her retainers or anybody else, but those who essentially are vouching for Ferdinand at this point are possibly trustworthy. Possibly. I still don't know. I don't know if I trust anybody in Arensbach besides Ferdinand, Eckert, and Justice. Neither my retainers nor I can even approach Detlinde anymore, since she no longer wishes to deal with Aviglave's attitude. A bizarre complaint, to say the least. The scholars who had gone to protest the trade arrangements had come back with their heads in their hands. Ferdinand was genuinely impressed that an Archducal family member could be raised into such a fool. It was hard to believe that Detlinde was the granddaughter of Veronica, who had so often proclaimed that there was no place for useless incompetence in the Archducal family. Wow, if Veronica knew about Detlinde's attitude and stuff, she would claim she's no granddaughter of hers. Lord Ferdinand, do you have a preference for the date? Sergius asked. The day of the farewell feast for Lanzanov. We have been forbidden from attending it, but as most of the nobles are going to be there, we will not be able to get any work done. I intended to pass the time by brewing, but a meal sounds like a fine idea. Lady Letizia is still underage and would not be allowed to attend the feast either, so our circumstances align. How convenient. On that date, they were guaranteed to be free from Detlinde's involvement. Sergius nodded, looking resigned. Ferdinand thought it was convenient that his fiancée, the next Archduke, wished to distance him. There was surely something to be said about that, but Sergius could not find the words. It's good, but at the same time it's not good, since it means you're not in the loop on things, which means that could be very potentially dangerous. Because, like you said, there's hardly anybody to trust in Arensbach anymore. Or at the moment, I should say, because, don't know who could trust at this point. I thank you ever so much for your invitation, Letizia said, taking the seat to which Ferdinand was gesturing. Justice produced one dish after another from the time stopper. Lady Rosemond sent us a wide variety of meals, Lady Letizia. It would seem that she is very eager to hear your thoughts on them. To start, this is inspired by pomme stew served with garnechel. Once the dishes were all on the table, Justice described each one with the aid of Rosemond's letter. None of the meals were recognizable at a glance, and even when Ferdinand tested them for poison, he struggled to determine which was which. In the meantime, Letizia merely stared at the plate sitting before her, frozen in place while gripping her cutlery. Most likely because the garnachel is nowhere to be seen. Rosemond used pork in its place, the fool. Ferdinand set down his cutlery and gave Letizia a sympathetic smile. The use of Arensbach seasoning should make it taste somewhat familiar, but with the lack of garnachel, he picked up some fluffy bread. You might want to consider it an entirely new dish. Her resolve steeled, Letizia cut into the soft buttery meat, then popped a small piece into her mouth. The morsel practically melted on her tongue, and an intensely rich flavor sent her taste buds tingling. Her eyes widened, then a smile blossomed on her face. Anyone could see that she found it delightful, but her joy soon turned into curiosity. Rosemond makes some truly unusual changes to you, as you can see, Ferdinand said with a shrug. To think she still compared it to pomme stew with garnachel, despite the complete absence of garnachel. Indeed, it is strange that something can taste so new despite being made with ingredients I am used to. It certainly is delicious, but I cannot believe it came out of the recipe I sent to Lady Rosemond. It is something else entirely. She paused and hesitantly asked, Is all food in Ehrenfest like this? Ferdinand shook his head, not wanting Letizia to get any strange ideas. Rosemond is the only one who gives her chefs such unusual requests. The dishes may be palatable, but I still wonder how she comes up with them. Letizia nodded, convinced. Lady Rosemond has sent Ehrenfest dishes made with Arensbach seasonings, and Arensbach dishes made with Ehrenfest seasonings, Justice said with a smile. Even if you are having them for the very first time, they are bound to taste familiar. Rosemond's original recipes might be strange to your palate, but I expect people from other duchies to enjoy them more than dishes made with Lanzanov spices and seasonings. Ferdinand added, Arensbach-style cooking had taken influence from its Lanzanov imports, leading to many sour and intensely spicy dishes. Intensely spicy? So what, are Lanzanov supposed to be like Indians in this regard? Because, Indians invented hot and spicy? Were this served during an Archduke conference, the reception would almost certainly be negative. It might be wise to consider purchasing her recipes and introducing them as new Arensbach dishes. That can be negotiated during the upcoming introductory tournament. If Letizia agreed, it would give Ferdinand a reason to attend the introductory tournament. He had gone to the previous year as Detlende's escort, but that option was no longer on the table. His true intention was to visit the Royal Academy's library to brew magic tools, but he needed an airtight excuse to keep Georgine from interfering. Yeah! Once an acceptable amount of time had passed, Ferdinand turned the discussion to the true reason he had asked Letizia to lunch. That aside, I am aware you have been visiting the Lanzanov estate at Lady Detlende's invitation. Letizia gave a knowing smile, suggesting that she understood everything. Those of Lanzanov wish to stay on good terms with Arensbach, and Lord Leonzio is exceptionally friendly. However, Lord Ferdinand, I have seen you do not chastise Lady Detlende for her behavior. Should you not act more like her fiancé and indicate your disapproval of her actions? How foolish. Arensbach is to blame for her becoming an ill-behaving harlot. I do not even wish to look at that immoral adulteress. Why must I dirty my hands dealing with her? Yeah, would she still be acting this way if she was married to Ferdinand? I don't know. Probably. Consider Ferdinand probably wouldn't even want to touch her. Knowing better than to voice those thoughts, Ferdinand merely smiled and shook his head. He did not care about Detlende. His only concern was securing information about the Lanzanov estate. But perhaps he had spoken too indirectly for a child to understand. He decided to phrase his next question more carefully. Lady Letizia, what manner of place is the Lanzanov estate? I cannot approach it as Lady Detlende views me with suspicion. That reminds me, she said that if you and Lord Leonzio met, you would duel over her hand in marriage. Excuse me? Ferdinand squeezed his eyes shut, suppressing the urge to snap. That is not intelligence on the estate, fool. Getting frustrated would only frighten her and make it harder to find out what he wanted to know. Rosemont and the other Ehrenfest Archduke candidates hadn't been the only ones to learn from their time together. Instead, he smiled and said, is there anything else? Lord Leonzio shares blood with the Jürgen Schmidt royal family, and it would seem that he personally connected with the Sovereign Knight Commander this summer. Though the occurrence during the funeral created so many discussions, I am unsure how close they are or what truly happened. Ferdinand frowned. Robert, the Sovereign Knight Commander, knew about the seeds of Adalgisa, and using that knowledge, he had convinced the king to remove Ferdinand from Ehrenfest. It was unclear how Robert was connected with Adalgisa, but he viewed Ferdinand and Ehrenfest as enemies. Lord Leonzio of Lanzanov associating with Lord Roblet, Ferdinand muttered. I do not know how much Lady Detlende's words can be trusted, but this is a serious cause for concern. I would not expect the Sovereign Knight Commander to do anything suspicious, especially after he went to such lengths to resolve the funeral incident. Roblet had gone along with Detlende's foolish demand to execute the culprits before a proper investigation could take place. On top of that, when the subsequent inquiry had started, he had continually emphasized that Ehrenfest Knights were to blame, directing the public eye away from the Sovereign Knight's order. The news that he was using his frequent visits to the Lanzanov estate to consort with Leonzio when he was supposed to be carrying out an impartial investigation, no less, was dubious to no end. That said, from Letizia's perspective, the Sovereign Knight Commander had worked arduously to keep the funeral situation under control. She believed that he deserved nothing but gratitude. Ferdinand determined that there was no point trying to change her mind, no matter how long he spent expounding Roblet's questionable attributes. Others would assume he was merely lashing out in frustration now that Ehrenfest was under suspicion. The atmosphere that had set in during the inquiry was still fresh in his mind. I am more concerned about Lady Detlende, Ferdinand said with a smile, masking his true thoughts. Who knows what is being whispered into her ear? Looking convinced, Letizia finally answered the question first put to her. According to Lady Detlende, there's a door in the Lanzanov estate that can only be opened by the Ob. The room beyond it apparently exists for Lanzanov princesses going to the sovereignty. I can only imagine the problems that would have arisen if a princess had come when our foundation was not died. Ferdinand already knew what sat beyond that door, a teleportation circle connecting Arensbach with the Adalgisa villa. Imagine telling someone to negotiate for the royal family to accept a Lanzanov princess before your foundation has even been died. Had the royal family acceded to the demand, Detlende would have embarrassed herself when she proved unable to open the door for the princess. The sheer foolishness of the situation made Ferdinand want to scoff, so he quickly changed the subject. It would seem that Lady Detlende finally finished dyeing the foundation. I suppose I will need to begin offering my mana as well. Under normal circumstances, a fiancé from another duchy would not be made to perform mana replenishment, but documents from the previous Archduke have made it possible to arrange, with a few troublesome restrictions. He continued, you shall use this opportunity to start practicing mana replenishment as well, Lady Letizia. Lord Ferdinand, I was told that new sweets from Lady Rosamund had arrived. There was a dark gloom in Letizia's eyes as she asked about her reward. She was still not used to controlling her mana, so the thought of performing mana replenishment must have been anything but pleasant. Although she had plenty of stamina and did not collapse over the smallest inconvenience, two advantages over Rosamund, she was a slow learner who wasted an enormous amount of time on breaks. Indeed, Ferdinand replied, she sent more than usual to be given to you, at your request. Apparently, in her response to my letters, she told me not to push someone your age too hard, despite what Aronsbach's circumstances might demand. Rosamund asked not to be used as a reference point, but Lady Letizia would be much further in her studies if she desired books as a reward instead of sweets. As he resisted the urge to sigh, Letizia clapped her hands together in realization. I received a jar of Lansdowne sweets from Lord Leonzio. They are like face stones in appearance, and each one can be enjoyed for a very long time. So, gobstoppers? Like everlasting gobstoppers? Cool! Ferdinand had not received any sweets, both because he took very little interest in them, and because Detlinde had ordered him to stay away from Lanzanov. Still, he was curious to see what Lanzanov had given her, and whether they could be used for brewing. I received splendid toys as well, Letizia continued. Would you care to see? Unlike those made in Ehrenfest, these are rather strange and can only be used once. But they are unique and terribly fun. If you pull the string attached to them, flower petals of all colors shoot out and flutter around the room. It is beautiful and always manages to raise my spirits. Roswitha, could you fetch the sweets and toys? Here you are, the head attendant replied, first presenting her lady with the multicolored sweets that looked similar to face stones. Letizia went first, eating one with a joyful smile. Ferdinand did the same and immediately had to fight back the urge to spit it out. His palate was being assaulted by an unbearable sweetness as though he was eating a lump of pure sugar. This is much too sweet, Ferdinand said with a grimace. He then crunched the candy into pieces, desperate to swallow it as quickly as he could. Letizia stared in shock, appalled to see one of her precious sweets go to waste. It's not like it's going to waste, he's eating it! Ferdinand was unfazed, though letting the flavor settle in his mouth would have been a miserable experience. Ferdinand took a generous sip of tea to wash away the lingering sweetness, then turned to the other items Roswitha brought over. Are these the Lansdowne toys you told me about? They appear to be simple silver tubes, each with a piece of string dangling from one end. An explanation was certainly in order. Letizia smiled happily. She picked one up and gave the string a firm tug. Out burst flower petals of various colors which fluttered through the air. How does the toy work? It is unlikely to be a magic tool, but I know that much. Was that not positively stunning? Letizia asked. May I have one of these toys? I'm eager to find out how they are made. Letizia must not have expected such a request. She faltered and let out a quiet, what? She had several toys, yet she was unwilling to part with a single one. After staring at her Lansdowne goods for some time, Letizia finally made up her mind. She took the jar which still contained the 3 sweets and one of the silver tubes, and looked up at Ferdinand. Lord Ferdinand, I intended to give these to Lady Rosamund, but if you reduce my workload, I will allow you to take one. Her voice had cracked as she forced out the last few words. She must have known that her attempts to negotiate was not very ladylike. Ferdinand responded with a look of exasperation, having already deduced the culprit. Has Rosamund been putting strange ideas in your head by chance? She is not to blame. Rather, Rosamund was the only one who would encourage an Archduke candidate from another duchy to act so brazenly. Good grief, what a headache. Very well, in return for one of these toys, I will reduce your workload to some degree. However, take care not to accept too much advice from Rosamund. She can be a bad influence at times. Ferdinand extended a hand and then heaved a heavy sigh. It was his job to clean up the messes his charge created. He would need to spend the evening responding to Rosamund's letter. There was much for which she needed to be chastised. Lord Ferdinand, here is a letter from Lady Rosamund and a roughly drafted response, Sergius said, then looked down at the table. That, was a gift from Lady Letizia. Put them in that ingredients box, Ferdinand replied. Looking up from the silver tube he was meticulously taking apart and analyzing. It no longer bore the slightest resemblance to its original shape, but it was indeed one of the toys Letizia had received from Lanzanov. At the pull of a string, and without any magic whatsoever, the contents of the tube can be ejected. There were petals inside this time, but what if they were replaced with something else? This could easily become a very dangerous weapon. In any case, there was nothing more I wished to learn about this toy. You may clear it away. It was meant to bring happiness with its beauty, Sergius said, looking sad. Perhaps it was cruel of Ferdinand to disassemble the toy he had taken from Letizia and then simply have it disposed of, but those had been his intentions from the very beginning. Neither glum looks nor complaints would affect him in the slightest. Lord Ferdinand, Justice said, although I do not mind the ingredients from Lady Rosamund being moved into your hidden room, exercise some restraint with their brewing. We are not on watch tonight. Please do not trouble those who are. Ferdinand waved them away, then went into his hidden room with a box containing both letters and ingredients from Rosamund. Nothing of particular note. He had started to start by reading the letters, including a report from Justice, which was slotted neatly between Rosamund's letters and the roughly drafted response. It was a summary of all the information they had acquired from Letizia's retainers over lunch and corroborated everything she had told them directly. By this point, it was obvious that Rabla and Leonzio were on good terms. Many had seen the Knight Commander take great interest in Lanzanov's situation during the inquiry. Rabla and Lanzanov, If the Sovereign Knight Commander truly was connected to the Adalja Sevilla, then he presumably had strong ties to Lanzanov. It was possible he would try to convince the royal family to accept their princess. Moreover, Georgine had taken Rabla to the Lanzanov estate. The duty would have normally have fallen to Detlinde, but she was being kept away from the Knight Commander after her emotional demand that the treasonous criminals be executed. It was a perfectly logical decision, but Ferdinand still considered it suspicious. It's just a gut feeling. Sylvester's voice echoed in his mind. The man's instincts truly were impressive. Countless times before he had danced through disaster with nothing else to guide him. Ferdinand was well aware that he needed to keep a close eye on Georgine and obtain as much intelligence as he could, but his move to the Western Building had complicated matters. Worse still, Georgine had most likely experienced the consequences of Sylvester's instincts firsthand. The two of them had grown up together after all. Ferdinand could still recall the sharp breath she had taken in response to her brother's remark during the inquiry. She was presumably on guard as well. Something is going to happen. There's no mistaking that. However, no matter how things developed, negotiations with the royal family would go smoothly once he finished what he was making. What has he been making? Ferdinand sat in his chair and thought about the maximal quality Fae paper Rosamund had sent him. Her mana quantity was beyond impressive. As long as she followed his recipe, he would have everything he needed before the next Interduchy tournament. I am more concerned about what Sylvester and the first prince were alluding to. It had been stated during the inquiry that Ferdinand and Rosamund were clearly loyal to the royal family and obedient followers of royal decrees. That was obviously true for Ferdinand, who had transferred into Arensbach at the king's order. But what about Rosamund? Are they referring to the religious ceremonies held during the Archduke Conference, or perhaps something else entirely? Are the rumors true that she's been sent to the Sovereign Temple? Nope! But it's worse! It's much worse! Because at least with the Sovereign Temple, once she came of age, she would have been sent back. No, she won't be able to be sent back on this one. Because of the recent incidents, interactions between Ferdinand and Ehrenfest, where the culprits had come from, were under careful observation. Simply receiving his luggage and the letters had taken a great deal of work, so a private discussion with Sylvester had been out of the question. Ferdinand probed the letters as best he could, but neither Sylvester nor Rosamund touched upon anything he needed to know. In better terms, he might have welcomed that lack of news. Perhaps he was overthinking things, but he had a bad feeling about their situation. Rosamund's letter says nothing about her Geduld. How can I not be suspicious? Ferdinand touched the paper to see what she had written with her invisible ink, but still there was no answer to his question. She was hiding something that she could not consult him about. Please tell me your Geduld. That was the question he had asked to make sure neither Ehrenfest's nor Rosamund's situation had changed. He had only wanted confirmation. Rosamund often struggled with noble euphemisms, but she already knew that one's Geduld meant one's home or someone one's loved. If all were well, she would have written, Ehrenfest is my Geduld, as are my library and those of the lower city. You know that already, don't you? Or if she had not understood the question, she would have requested an explanation. Your decision to not answer at all is severely more suspicious, fool. She had doubtless read too deeply into the question. Then, fearing what Ferdinand might say about her response, she had begun to doubt the identity of her Geduld. Had something happened to encourage her decision? Yeah, something happened. She's a Zent candidate and is close to obtaining the Gruterscheid, so they're going to adopt her. Prince Sigiswald is aware of the circumstances, and so the royal family is likely involved. I do not know the details, but I imagine their objective is the Gruterscheid. Those of the royal family had barely even been able to read the ancient language in the underground archive. If they were in desperate need of the Gruterscheid, they would naturally attempt to bring Rosamund into their fold by any means necessary. After all, she had mastered the language during her time in the temple. Was that something Rosamund would wish for? Or had they driven her into a corner as they had done to Ferdinand when giving him his decree? Being apart from her was painfully frustrating. If he could just glimpse her face, he would see through any attempts at secrecy in an instant. Yeah, she's so bad at that. I should be able to help once I finish what I am making, but... What is he making? I want to know! What was Rosamund trying to protect? What did she treasure more than anything else? Unless he could deduce what was motivating her, Ferdinand worried that his hard work would ultimately be for nothing. Ferdinand tossed the letter onto his desk, frustrated that he could not simply ask Rosamund for the answer he sought. The distance between them now truly was vast. I do not know the circumstances, what Rosamund is hiding from me, or what is motivating her, but a single misstep, and that fool will end up on another of one of her rampages. The fog of concern and mistrust that had descended upon him was growing ever thicker. He had a much weaker grasp on the other's intentions, so each move he made risked disaster. Rosamund's Geduld had once been so clear. Now it was anything but. And with Sylvester offering so little in the way of information, Ferdinand was struggling to see the path ahead. Come winter, we will at least be able to speak through Raymond once again. There is also the introductory tournament coming up as well. As soon as the opportunity arises, I will stop these inefficient attempts to I will stop these ineffectual attempts to probe her through letters and question her directly. Ferdinand gave an annoyed sigh. For now, like Rosamund, he had no choice but to put his troubles on hold. Okay, here we go. Dirk's and Bertram's baptisms. Once the Harvest Festival concluded, winter preparations began. This was nothing new, so I was comfortably entrusting the orphanage and my high mistress chambers to Fran and the others. As for Melkor and the Apprentice Blues, they were receiving the guidance of their temple attendants, and so would spend most of their time in the castle visiting only for the dedication ritual. Their temple attendants were the ones who would suffer if such preparations weren't done properly. Leaving the temple to its own devices, I focused on my own preparations. I was busy making the Fey paper for Ferdinand and gathering the necessary materials to create my library shoe mills. But I'd still found the time to send food and sweets to Arensbach. My last delivery, the one I'd sent alongside my letters, was probably running out by now. But this one would last until we met during the introductory tournament. This time I'm sent an Arensbach dish with a delicious fish broth, tweaked to suit my taste, of course. The resulting meal would probably make anyone used to the Duchy's cooking exclaim, "This is delicious but completely wrong! It's a fake!" But that didn't bother me. Do we even need to go gathering at this rate? Clarissa asked, looking up from Herscher's list of ingredients while I continued to brew paper. Lord Ferdinand must have everything we need in his workshop. She was awestruck and understandably so. The workshop was a veritable treasure trove for scholars into brewing. Most of these ingredients were from Justice's treks across Jurgensmid, I said, but Ferdinand did gather some of them himself. During spring prayer and the Harvest Festival, he used to go out and find ingredients while I focused on the rituals and preserving my stamina. I used time-saving magic while glaring down at the brewing pot. This new recipe from Ferdinand involved so many steps and even more ingredients, it was agonizingly tedious. If only I could just shoot out a bunch of mana, making a ton of gold dust, then dump it all in. Ugh. As I prepared for the Royal Academy, an ordinance from Grisha arrived. After searching through the confiscated goods and the other available hand-me-downs, she and the others had managed to obtain formal attire for Dirk's and Bertram's baptisms, as well as for the Apprentice Blues. They will need to be fitted, the ordinance said. When can we bring them to the temple? Let's say 3 days from now, I replied. My brewing shall end there. Fine then, to give you time to rest. 5 then, to give you time to rest. The ordinance repeated its message twice more, and with that the date was arranged. On the day of the fittings, it was decided that the Apprentice Blues would go to Melkor's room to select their favorite clothes. A delivery from the Archduke had recently arrived. There were plenty of outfits to consider for the Feast of Beginnings, the Children's Playroom, the Royal Academy, Writing Brewing, the list went on. We shall sort out Dirk's and Bertram's clothes in the orphanage, I said, then took Grisha and my attendants with me to the first floor, where one could find the large rooms of the pre-baptism children. Our 2 future nobles needed outfits for their baptisms and the playroom. Grisha busily fitted them with clothes, while she then placed into separate baskets. I can't believe we're getting clothes this pretty, Dirk said, barely containing his amazement. He had only ever worn clothes that weren't robes when going to the forest. Bertram grimaced in contrast. I don't know, they look too old and cheap for a baptism. Just a year ago he had enjoyed a more opulent lifestyle as a son of Gebultord, so the garments did not come close to meeting his standards. My, they are more than the child of a criminal would ever deserve, Grisha sneered. If you dislike them that much, then you should have brought your own. It would have saved me the trouble of finding them for you. What? Bertram spun around in shock and was met with Grisha's cold smile. Her blue-green eyes, which were normally hidden by her bangs, were overflowing with scorn. It seems you do not understand your place, she said, her tone merciless. Am Ehrenfest did not save the children of criminals out of compassion or kindness. His motivation was to increase the duchy's noble population. If you give him reason to believe you might cause trouble, he will have you executed on the spot. Why should he allow you to live if you will only add to the conflict? Bertram went white as a sheet. He must never have heard anyone say that kind of thing in the temple. Yeah. Don't be complaining here. Ignoring the boy's anguish, Grisha continued. It was not at all easy to save you from the long-standing tradition of punishing entire families for the crimes of one member. You have been blessed with a phenomenal opportunity. If you cannot grasp that, you truly must be a troublemaker. Lorenz, would it not be best to eliminate him before he can be allowed to rejoin the outside world? Grisha, I interjected almost on instinct. You're going too far. She smiled at me, her eyes narrowed. This fool does not understand that more lives than he could count on his hands rest on his words and deeds, which means his brother Lorenz has not educated him properly. If you would spare even a dangerous troublemaker simply because he is a child, then we must at the very least beat the reality of his situation into him. Spoiling brats is not a kindness, Lady Rosamund. At this rate, his stupid actions will claim the lives of all those safe from the sins of their families. Dirk will receive the same punishment since he is being baptized with the Ob as his guardian alongside them. We had saved the children once, but that didn't mean they weren't immune from punishment. Plus, because they had entered the orphanage, any misdeeds they committed would cause all the orphans to be marked as dangerous. The nobles would not distinguish between those who had come last year and those who had always been there. Both the name-sworn nobles and the apprentice blues working hard would receive the same punishment. In the worst-case scenario, the entire temple would once again be scorned as people assumed it was barbaric harboring criminals. Having made her point clear, Gracia asked, Is that not what you want? That is not what you want, is it, Lady Rosamund? I shook my head. As I suspected, she said. I shall accompany Dirk for his baptism, while one of Lord Melkor's attendants will accompany Bertram for his. The Ob is preparing their rings. You would do that in spite of everything? I thank you ever so much, Gracia. She gave a slight smile. The clothes for their baptisms will remain here. The rest I shall take to the playroom in the castle, same as last year. Then, with the baskets in hand, she went on her way. Lorenz gave his brother, who was looking despondent, a slight rap on the head. Bertram, Gracia might have been harsh, but she was right. Moving to the castle is going to be a wake-up call. Whether you like it or not, you can't expect the same kind of kindness you received in the orphanage. From there, Dirk and Bertram chose their rooms in the noble section and the furniture that would go inside them. They would select attendants next spring. Conrad wanted to spend a bit more time in the orphanage as an apprentice Grey Priest. Then, once he had grown and developed enough mana to perform religious ceremonies, he would receive a room as an apprentice blue. Dirk and Bertram gave test blessings with a ring I'd allowed them to borrow, practiced the Heartspiel in preparation for their debut, and worked to memorize the steps of the baptism alongside some noble etiquette. The autumn coming-of-age ceremony came and went with the blink of an eye, as did the winter baptism. By the time the commoner ceremonies had ended, most nobles had arrived at the nobles' quarter. My retinue moved to the castle as well in preparation for winter socializing. The debuts and baptisms of the noble children would accompany the feast. On the day in question, in my room at the castle, Ditlin, Audley, and Laisletta began helping me change into my ceremonial robes. Gracia had gone to the temple to fetch both Dirk and the children's heartspiels from the orphanage. The ceremonial clothes are to be taken to the Royal Academy once today's ceremony is complete, correct? Audley asked. Correct, I replied. Klassenberg contacted Sylvester. Dedication rituals are going to be held at the very start of the term. Because we wanted to borrow divine instruments from the Sovereign Temple, we couldn't hold our ceremony at the same time as theirs. Performing it earlier was better for the third years, although a single ceremony was unlikely to have much of an impact. They would appreciate any opportunities to obtain more divine protections. Thus, a discussion with the Sovereign Temple and the Royal Academy's professors had concluded with an agreement that the students' dedication rituals would take place shortly after their return to the Academy. They would participate in those 3 separate waves, the lay nobles and the men nobles and the arch nobles. My circumstances are being ignored, I said. What do you think about that, Laisletta? The sovereign and top-ranking duchies always force their will upon those who are beneath them, she replied. However, Lord Wilfrid convinced the Ob to let him and the men nobles lead the men noble ceremony, and Charlotte the lay noble one to ease your burden. That is very helpful. Preparing for the ritual and going through the necessary meetings would take up a lot of my time, so unless I managed to blast through my classes, I wouldn't be able to return for Ehrenfest's dedication ritual. And to make things easier for the students, the Ob negotiated for the Blue Priest who accompanied you during the Archduke Conference to be allowed to visit the Royal Academy. If nothing else, you can expect to learn more than enough guards until the end of the Royal Academy's dedication ritual. Most heartening. In other words, Hartmut, Cornelius, Daniel, Lenore, and Angelica were all permitted to visit the Royal Academy until the dedication rituals were over. As much as that helps me, I am sure it will inconvenience everyone else, I said, making my disapproval clear. This sudden arrangement means they must now scramble to prepare for the Royal Academy. Their plans for winter socializing are surely in tatters, especially when they were going to use my absence to get ready for our move to the sovereignty. Audley consoled me with a wry smile. Lady Rosamund, there's no need to be frustrated. One of them was quite overjoyed about the opportunity to accompany you. That was Hartmut on this one. That goes without saying. Once I was changed and ordinance from Gracia arrived, Dirk, Bertram, and the other blue apprentices were now at the castle. Welcome, new children of Ehrenfest, Hartmut declared, standing beside me atop the stage. The door was thrown open and in came a line of children due to become nobles, including Dirk and Bertram, who were at the very end. They numbered 12 in total, and 6 of them were also going to be baptized today. Hartmut read from the Bible, then began the manor registration. It was customary to go in order of status from lowest to highest, so Dirk was called over first. He looked tense as he approached. The events that followed were quite ordinary. I presented the man a checking tool for him to hold. He did as instructed and made it shine, then the audience applauded. I had smiled at Dirk, who let a quiet relief sigh, then took a medal. He stamped it with the tool, thereby registering himself. Wait, what? Even though he had registered his mana, the colors had barely changed. They were faint, which made it hard to tell whether he had them all or none at all. The most I could really deduce was that the wind element was most prominent. What is one supposed to do at a time like this? I instinctively turned to look at Ferdinand, only to make eye contact with Hartman. It was kind of awkward, but he didn't seem to notice my reaction. He merely approached and peered down at the medal. He appears to have the divine protection of wind, Hartman muttered, stating what I already knew. He looked just as confused as I was feeling. I guess he doesn't know what happens either. No amount of contemplating would give me an answer, so I turned back to Dirk and smiled. One god has granted you her divine protection, wind. If you dedicate yourself to becoming worthy of this protection, you will surely receive many more blessings. That unusual development aside, Dirk's mana registration was complete. Hartman put the medal into a box, and Sylvester took the stage with the ring in hand. The audience stirred. That boy must be a child of the former Veronica faction, some whispered. That child escaped punishment, said others. In an instant, it was clear that Grisha had spoken the truth. Ignoring the buzz, Sylvester presented the ring to Dirk. I grant this ring to you, Dirk. Now that you have been accepted by the gods and the people, I shall become your guardian in place of your parents. And your status shall henceforth depend not on your house, but on your mana quantity. We've witnessed the birth of a new men noble. Congratulations. I am grateful from the bottom of my heart, Ehrenfest, Dirk replied, wearing a smile that betrayed not the slightest hint of anxiety. He gazed down at the red face stone adorning his newly acquired ring, which sat on his left third finger. May Gadul, the gods of earth, bless you, Dirk, I said, granting him a blessing. Dirk returned it just as we had practiced. The light floated through the air before reaching me. The audience applauded again, though more hesitantly this time. It was the first time I'd experienced such a blatant rejection during someone's baptism. Unease sprouted in my chest, but we had to move along. Bertram, I said. The second of our two orphans came on stage to register his mana, having to endure the harsh glares of the gathered nobles who were carefully searching for the slightest mistake or revealing step. His medal changed color normally. My thoughts returned to Dirk. There had to be a reason for his unusual medal. I would also be considered one with the devouring, but that hadn't happened during my baptism. Then again, maybe I was the weird one? My mana had come out omni-elemental, boasting every single color. Two gods have granted you their divine protection, water and fire, I said. If you dedicate yourself to becoming worthy of this protection, you will surely receive many more blessings. Again, Sylvester approached with the ring. This one had a blue face stone. Bertram had presumably been born during the summer. I grant this ring to you, Bertram. Now that you have been accepted by the gods and the people, I shall become your guardian in place of your parents, and your status will henceforth depend not on your house, but on your mana quantity. We witnessed the birth of a new men noble. Congratulations. I am grateful from the bottom of my heart, Ehrenfest, Bertram replied, kneeling with both arms outstretched. Sylvester must have recognized the gesture as he bent down slightly and gave the boy his hand. Bertram respectfully clasped it, then pressed the back against his forehead. A hush fell over the room as everyone took in the sight. Up atop the stage, Bertram was giving the greatest display of gratitude a noble could make. Well, of course, the guy managed to stay alive despite the fact that his whole family should have died, including Lorenz. After that, the rest of the children were baptized and the debuts began. The lay nobles played their harpsichords first, then it's time for Dirk, Bertram, and the rest of the other men nobles. Dirk played relatively well, considering how little time he'd had to practice. Bertram, meanwhile, was exceptional, a clear indication that he had received a proper upbringing as the son of a former noble. Once the debuts were complete, Hartman made a few closing remarks as the high priest before we both took our leave. I needed to change out of my ceremonial robes and into my socializing clothes. The gifting ceremony for the new students took place, and I ate lunch with the archducal family in the dining hall and returned to the grand hall to socialize. During the usual greetings, I was asked again and again whether I was moving to the Sovereign Temple. As my escort, Wolfrey was tasked with denying the rumors and shooing the curious nobles away. From there, I went around speaking to the children of the former Veronica faction, wishing them well at the Royal Academy. In the process, I noticed a few nobles aggressively devouring their food. It was strange. I might have expected that a few years ago when the food was new, but most people saw it as commonplace these days. Weirdos. Hartman must have noticed me staring because he quietly said these are presumably the nobles who were ordered to return home from the sovereignty. The plan's for you to meet them in a more relaxed environment when you return midway through winter. There's no need to speak with them now in the presence of such a large audience. Lady Rosemine, Dirk called. I turned to see him with Bertram, Grisha, and several people I recognized from the temple. They were socializing with the apprentice blues at their center. Meanwhile, Nicholas and the other soon-to-be first-years had put on the duchy capes and brooches they had just received. Dirk, don't act so close to Lady Rosemine at public events, Bertram said, tugging him away by the arm and teaching him about noble society. We should wait until she addresses us. Dirk immediately apologized to me. I smiled and focused on Bertram. Your performance earlier was excellent, and your display of gratitude to the god actually silenced the nobles, if only for a moment. Bertram faltered, then sheepishly looked away. He was nothing like his older brother Lorenz, who would have turned my compliment into a joke by asking whether he should kneel before me as well. Yeah, Lorenz probably would have done that. Bertram, I said, I must ask you to join Grisha in watching over Dirk, to ensure that he does not make any serious mistakes. He grimaced. Lady Rosamond, I mean no disrespect, but that is asking too much of me. It was true that keeping an eye on Dirk, a boy from the orphanage who knew so little about noble society, would not be easy in the slightest. But Bertram had really taken to the role of teacher. It was nice to see them getting along somewhat better than before. Bertram seems to be doing well, doesn't he, Grisha? I would not act so relieved yet, she replied. Her tone and the look she was giving the children convinced the severity of their situation. Okay. Let me see. 40 minutes. I'll do one more and then I'll stop. The winter playroom and another new term. The beginning of winter socializing meant the children would start using the playroom. I went to greet them as usual, then played games and studied with them. In particular, I wanted to make sure that none of the children of the former Veronica faction were being left out or bullied. The children old enough to attend the Royal Academy treated their peers from the former Veronica faction as they would anybody else. Maybe because they had spent time together at school, or maybe because they wanted the atmosphere at the Royal Academy to stay the same as no matter how much the outside world changed. In any case, their juniors followed their example, showing no signs of discrimination whatsoever. Everyone was focused on getting sweets, either by winning the games they were playing or trying to secure top grades. I expected the mood to be much heavier, so that was a pleasant surprise, Charlotte said. Sure was, Wilfred added. Charlotte was worried the playroom might end up the same as when you were asleep. Seems that hasn't happened. The Archducal couple was too busy socializing to join us for dinner, so it was just as children tonight. It gave us a chance to leisurely reflect on the playroom and plan for the Royal Academy. We were using an area-affecting sound blocker so that we could freely express our opinions. Wilfred and Charlotte were relieved that the playroom's atmosphere had stayed positive. Melchior was also enjoying his time there. There might now be an unspoken rule among the children that they will only allow themselves to be wrapped up in the adults' factions disputes while they are in Ehrenfest, I said. That way they will spend their time at the Royal Academy working together to surpass the other duchies. I hope their attitude lasts. Charlotte nodded. Assuming they hold on to their perspective as adults, it might be the case that future generations focus more on interduchy politics than internal power struggles. Wilfred nodded and turned to Melchior. I was most surprised to see how well you led the other children, Melchior. I was worried that you might have faced some issues since you were hidden away in the northern building for last year's purge. But everything has been going swimmingly. Brother, I think it's because I spent so much time speaking and playing with everyone in the temple orphanage, Melchior replied with a smile. There are more kids here, but the experience is more or less the same. As he had said, his time spent in the orphanage was paying off. He was able to keep an eye on his surroundings rather than being completely absorbed in his games. I'm more concerned about how our upcoming first years are going to find their classes, I said. There weren't many chances for them to study during last year's playroom, were there? Are they going to be okay? Plenty of work had already been done toward preparing for their written lessons, so I wasn't worried about them. About those, I was sure everyone would obtain the highest grades possible, but they would all at least pass on the first day. One thing that had stood out to me, however, was that they hadn't practiced the Harpspiel enough. There was an aggressively large skill gap between the new students and our current first years. Sister, there's no point worrying about that now, Charlotte assured me. We will get them to practice while our musicians are here. Then we can keep a close eye on each student's progress. So you'll make sure everyone's up to scratch, huh? Wilfred muttered, just don't repeat the nightmare of our first year. How rude. The library isn't at stake, so I obviously won't go on another rampage like that. I was worried about Dirk and Bertram not fitting in, but they both seem to be doing fine, I said. They had played cards and karta at the orphanage, so they had won a few games in the playroom and celebrated over the sweets they received as prizes. Nobody had treated them with any obvious malice either, though maybe that was because we were keeping watch. Only half a year had passed since Dirk resolved to become a noble. He was good at playing cards, but he was lagging behind when it came to history and geography, not to mention the Harpspiel. Above all else, though, there was still plenty for him to learn about noble common sense. As for Bertram, he had needed to seriously reevaluate his position. If not for the purge, he would have been a men noble bordering on an archnoble. Now that he had been baptized from the orphanage, however, he was at the very bottom of the men nobles, a tremendous step down from his previous status. He couldn't even call Lorenz his brother anymore. It was easy to see where his uncertainty had come from. This is the first time the Op has baptized nobles from the orphanage, I said. Melchior, they are bound to face some discrimination, so please keep an eye on to ensure it does not develop into anything serious. Yes, sister. The apprentice blues staying at the castle weren't really being inconvenienced either. One of the shrine maidens had said that while she didn't mind the current living arrangements, she felt more relaxed at the temple when she hadn't attended. As a whole, it seemed that the apprentice blues had all bonded with their servants over the course of the harvest festival, so they found it a little upsetting to be apart from them. I got sad whenever I needed to leave Fran and the others, so I understood exactly what they meant. I can only hope that nobody who resents the former Veronica faction has been assigned as a playroom attendant, I remarked. Florencia chose them, correct, Charlotte? Do you know who is looking after the children staying in the castle? Fear not, sister. My adult attendants will join them upon my return to the Royal Academy. There is nothing for you to worry about. Florencia's attendants will be busy taking care of the newborn, so Charlotte had assigned her own attendants to replace them. That was nice to hear. Oh, that reminds me. Charlotte, the smith has delivered my order. Already? I'm ever so delighted, dear sister. Of course I was referring to the pendant emblazoned with my crest. It was a precious gift, and we had come up with the design ourselves. So it was no mere medallion. Instead, it was a fairly extravagant, boasting up an open work that depicted Charlotte's maternal symbol and the sigils of the gods whose divine protection she sought. The decorations of such a precise and detailed nature was Johann's specialty, so the finished product was fairly wonderful. We had also asked for the inclusion of a small socket among the sigils so that Charlotte could insert it into her own face stones. For charms meant to obtain divine protections from the gods, it was best to use one's own face stones to facilitate the flow of mana and make it easier for one's prayers to reach the gods. Your order, Melkor probed? Charlotte asked me for something that would demonstrate our connection as sisters even when we are apart. So I got my personal smith to make her a pendant marked with my crest. Can I not have one too, he asked. His face was clouding over, but whether or not I ordered another was entirely up to him. Charlotte's pendant was the product of my excitement that she wanted us to remain sisters even after my departure. Most other nobles in her situation would consider me a stranger once I am gone. Doubly so with my adoption being nullified, so I can only hand out mementos to those who request them. Making the crest on demand was fine, but handing them out was unprovoked, risked my intended recipients refusing me with a curt, "But we are going to be strangers once you leave." "I respect you as my older sister, Rosamund, and will miss you when you are gone," Melkor said. "I want your crest too." "Then I shall order another. If we make the request now, Johann should be able to finish it over the winter." The settled snow was still quite shallow, so our order will reach Johann without issue. I'd heard that he had plenty of spare time over the winter, as was often the case when you were trapped indoors, so he would probably be glad to have work to do. Melkor's face lit up with a smile. I explained the nuances of Charlotte's design, then worked with him to come up with a new pendant. All of a sudden, Wilfrid started drawing beside me. "I want something like this," he announced. "What? You want a connection to me as well, Wilfrid? That's surprising," I asked, frowning. The request from Charlotte and Melkor made sense. They actually liked me, after all. But Wilfrid had loathed our engagement and even badmouthed me quite a bit. I didn't understand why he would want my crest. "Like I said, I still love you as a sister," he explained, looking slightly awkward. That's became especially clear to me over the past few days. Gone was the tense atmosphere that had always hung over him. Perhaps by speaking his mind, he had managed to grow out of his prickly, rebellious phase. But was this not way too sudden? Not once over the course of our entire engagement had we acted like a real couple, so my feelings hadn't changed before or after it was cancelled. I couldn't understand why he was flip-flopping so much. "Dear brother," I said, "your attitude has changed drastically since our engagement was cancelled. Is there really that much separating a fiancé from a sibling?" "Of course," he replied. "Ah, are you still unaware, maybe? It should become clear soon enough. I didn't understand it when we first got engaged either." "But you understand it now?" "Yeah, couples and siblings are worlds apart, so this outcome was always inevitable for us. It wasn't something I could endure." He looked me over, then smiled contentedly. "Hopefully it won't be long before you grow up as well." He then held out the design he wanted. Looking truly enlightened, I couldn't help feeling a bit envious that he had grown up before me. "Oh, but I see he hasn't outgrown his love for pointing at pointlessly cool designs." Yep. I sent a letter to the planting company the very next day, informing them of my urgent orders for Johann. Then I spent the rest of my time before the new academic term, observing the playroom, having discussions over dinner, studying for my classes, and going over the steps for the upcoming dedication rituals. On the day the 4th years were scheduled to leave, Wilfrid and I teleported to the Royal Academy. "Please relax here for now, Lady Rosamund," Gleesa said. "Grisha and I shall prepare your room." This year, Laisletta had taken Riarda's place as my adult attendant. This was so Brunhilde could focus on business with the royal family and top-ranking duchies, and Adelie could remain in Ehrenfest to keep Clarissa in check. Good luck with that. It would also be a good opportunity for Laisletta to interact with sovereign attendants. "Laisletta, please confirm that rooms have been prepared for Hartman and the others who will be joining us for the dedication rituals," I said. "As you wish." As she and Grisha went off to put my things away, Brunhilde guided me to the common room. She would only be acting as my retainer here at the Royal Academy. Back in Ehrenfest, she had a room in the western building and was now being treated as a member of the Archducal family. This meant she couldn't enter the northern building without the Archduke's permission, so we seldom saw one another. For the first time in quite a while, Brunhilde prepared some tea for me. "How are things in Groschel?" I asked. "Thanks to the Archducal family's help and Clarissa's supportive circles, everything looks so much better. In the autumn, one carpentry workshop after another sent us its completed products, and our buildings had doors and windows in the blink of an eye. Father was especially glad to have approved the wider roads in the business district when he saw the abundance of carriages passing through it. Our plan is to finish the interiors over the winter with the aim to have all manner of stores ready come spring. As craftsmen and merchants have streamed into Groschel with instructions, so too had supplies for the winter. The rapid increase in the city's population had made it quite busy indeed. Also," I said, "in regard to your little sister, Bertilde, how am I expected to interact with her?" "Bertilde has been eagerly serving Lady Elvira in anticipation of becoming your attendant. I would be grateful if you decided to take her as a retainer, even if only for this winter." Brunhilde wanted to give her sister an opportunity to serve as my apprentice attendant. It would only be for a short while before my departure, but I accepted at once. "You mean to train her yourself, correct?" I asked. "Perhaps you could involve Melchior's retainers? I intend to borrow those who will serve him at the Royal Academy, but they will not be able to enter my room. At the very least, I wish to give him the opportunity to witness the preparations and groundwork that go into tea parties with top-ranking duchies. There is much they will need to see to understand." Out of all of Ehrenfest's students, Brunhilde had the most experience dealing with top-ranking duchies. It was important that she train her successors as much as she could before graduating. "As you will," she said. "This is for Ehrenfest's future. I shall do the best I can." Brunhilde went on to inform me that she had received some Ehrensbach cloth through Florencia, then praised my decision to prop up the first wife. The Lasking elders' indignation was quite troublesome when they were beginning the generational shift. And after I promised the Ob during our engagement that I would support Lady Florencia, I am pleased beyond words that you chose to bolster her over me. Brunhilde and Florencia were of the same faction. It wouldn't have been wise to drive a wedge between them when the duchy's women had finally been unified under a single banner. "I do not expect to be of much use, considering my lack of socializing skills," I said. "Still, I will do everything I can to support you, to minimize the impact my move has on Ehrenfest." "Your kindness is appreciated, Lady Rosemite," she gave a refined giggle. "As your attendant, I am meant to support you." Brunhilde then took a step back, allowing Muriel to approach me in her place. She had given her name to Elvira and was, to my knowledge, rather busy with the printing industry. She too served as my retainer only at the Royal Academy. "May this term be a peaceful one, Lady Rosemite," she said. "Indeed, this may be our last term together, but I am looking forward to it. How is the printing industry, might I ask?" "We scholars are puzzling over the use of mana-efficient teleportation circles to send your books to the castle. Frequent testing has caused rapid degradation, and my current task is to make the circles require even less mana to use." According to Miriella, Elvira was working hard to ensure that new books could easily be sent to me as part of my deposit system. "Oh, Mother. You may wish to ask Raymond of the Herscher Laboratory for advice," I said, sincerely moved. "Perhaps you could do even more research with him. I will be busy making magic tools for my library." Charlotte returned to the Royal Academy the following day. Then Theodore came a day later. He told us about the Gutenberg stay in Kernberger. We took a breather once the second years had all arrived, then went gathering in preparation for our lessons. Some of the apprentice knights in the higher grades had gone already, but the apprentice scholars and attendants still needed materials. We had decided to go together for maximum safety. I climbed in my high beast, after which Judith took the passenger seat. She was going to be guarding me for the duration of our trip. But as we exited the dormitory on our way to the gathering spot, something above us caught my eye. Familiar beams of light in the same magic circle that had taken over the sky. Curious, I started ascending to get a better look. "Lady Rosamund, how far up are we going?" Judith asked quizzically. Her concern brought me back to my senses. Her other guard knights were following me skyward, looking quite uncertain. "I intended to go even higher, but this will do for now," I said. "I would not want to worry anyone." I descended to the gathering spot, then partially covered it with Shitsaria's shield. "This is the most I am going to do," I said. "The rest of you will need to regenerate the gathering spot so that you can obtain more divine protections. The adults managed it during the Archduke conference, so I expect you to succeed as well." The other duchy students were replenishing their own gathering spots, so our students needed to start doing the same, otherwise they might start falling behind in the long term. Because I was leaving next year, I wanted to make sure they were up to scratch before then. Ehrenfest currently had the lead when it came to religious ceremonies, and that was something I wanted them to maintain. "We should gather more rejuvenation potion ingredients than usual," I said. "The dedication ritual will require them." Feline did as instructed, collecting as many ingredients as she could, then gathered with the others to take part in the replenishment ritual, a look of steely determination on her face. I taught everyone what to recite, at which point the students formed a ring and started praying to Flutrain. The lay nobles and younger students had to remove their hands from the earth before the ceremony was complete, but it concluded with that incident. Just as during the Archduke conference, the gathering spot had regenerated. "Wolfried, Charlotte," I said, "take everyone back to the dormitory. There's something I wish to check, but I will need to go high up into the sky." "Can you tell us what that something is, sister?" "A secret related to the royal family." "Understood. Be careful." There was no point explaining the magic circle to them when they couldn't see it. I climbed back up into my high beast and soared up into the sky, into the air, far, far above the lines of mana. Lady Rosamund, how high are we going? Judith cried once again in the passenger seat. She was trembling with fear, having never reached this altitude before. Just a bit higher, I replied. I needed to see it all. Once we were high enough, I gazed down at the snow-covered grounds of the Royal Academy. They reminded me of a white canvas, onto which were painted the lines of divine colors that formed the magic circle. Everything beyond it was lost in a sea of clouds stretching into the distance in all directions. In a sense, it looked as though the Royal Academy had been made to suit the circle, not the other way around. This is a selection magic circle. Like the circles that had appeared in the Bible and atop the whirling stage, its purpose was to reveal Zet candidates. It hadn't changed at all since the Archduke Conference, nor had it disappeared, even though I'd returned to Ehrenfest after creating it. The magic circle appeared after I prayed a ton and dedicated my mana to the gods, so it definitely has something to do with choosing the next Zet, but I don't know. Will it change when I'm adopted and registered as a member of the royal family? I don't know. The Bible hadn't said, nor had any new information appeared with it since the magic circle's appearance. From what I'd seen, there wasn't even an explanation in the underground archive. Maybe it was lurking in one of the texts I'd yet to read. But most of the documents there were just long-winded explanations from previous kings that boiled down to, we worked our fingers to the bone, now it's your turn. Mana activates magic circles, so maybe I could activate this one by showering it with blessings, or I could drop some mana-packed face stones onto it? But wait. Raining stones down on the other students probably isn't the safest idea. I tried to think of other ways to activate the magic circle, but nothing came to mind. Prayers make the circle appear, so maybe prayers will make it activate. Does that mean I should return to the shrines? Or is there something else I should pray? And is it just me, or have I spent so much time praying recently? We'd performed the dedication ritual in the auditorium after the magic circle appeared, but that hadn't seemed to change much. Did you learn something? Judith asked me. I can see something, but I'm not sure what to do next. Let's go back to the dormitory. This wasn't the first time my lack of creativity had troubled me. I couldn't force my guard knights to wait around while I spent an eternity contemplating my next move. Judith, can you think of a good place to pray? I asked. We just prayed at a gathering spot, but I think it's more common to pray at the back of the auditorium, where the shrine is, I mean. To a normal person, the chapel was obviously the best place. I was so used to praying there, here, there, and everywhere, but it hadn't even occurred to me. Plus, now that I thought about it, I prayed in the auditorium during the Archduke Conference, not the farthest hall where the shrine was located. I guess we need to try the farthest hall next. Wait, isn't that where we're holding the upcoming dedication rituals? Maybe they would activate the magic circle? It was a good thing I was realizing this now and not during the rituals when it would already be too late. Giving the royal family a heads up would probably be a good idea. Very good, Judith, very good, I exclaimed. The whole country will thank you for what you've done today. Huh? As we made our way back to the others, I couldn't help but smile at the confusion in Judith's violet eyes. Yeah, she's very confused. It was the new students' first day at the Royal Academy. The seniors welcomed them with open arms and treated them as guests. Bertilda was among the new arrivals, and she came to the common room at the guidance of the other students. She was brought to a seat near me and smiled at her elder sister. Brunhilde poured her some tea. The two siblings had the same large amber eyes. They also had a common trait in their long, silky hair, but it wasn't the same color. Brunhilde's was crimson, while Bertilde's was rose pink. Welcome, Bertilde, I said. Listen closely to Brunhilde as my apprentice attendant. Yes, Lady Rosamund. Melkor's apprentice retainers were brought over to me as well, whereupon we discussed our future plans. As always, those in my service would need to finish their lessons as quickly as possible so they could accompany me to the library. As first years, you would be able to finish your lessons sooner than the others I expected. Study well and obtain good grades for Melkor's and your own sake. Understood. Nicholas was the last of the new students to arrive. It certainly was busy today. Even the senior students were in the common room. We discussed the plans for the year's joint research, then I assigned duties to the apprentice scholars, whether they were archducal retainers or not. Last year we came dangerously close to losing our research results to Drwonkel, I said. Take care to preserve our secrets this year, and include something unique to Ehrenfest in your work. In the meantime, Daniel, Angelica, Lenore, Cartman, and Cornelius arrived. They comprised the adults who would don blue robes to participate in this year's dedication ritual. The lay nobles will perform their dedication ritual first, then the men nobles and the archnobles and archduke candidates, I said. Participating in them will all doubtlessly test you, but I trust you to remain strong. It must be concluded before Ehrenfest's dedication ritual, Hartman announced with a smile. You may count on us to arrange the dates with Klassenberg and the Sovereign Temple. Your studies will not be impacted in the slightest. At times like this, I remembered that Hartman truly was reliable. If only he hadn't said it while grinning from ear to ear and stroking the crested face stone at his chest. Ah, I see everyone is here, said a familiar voice. I am Hersher, the dormitory supervisor. Upon her arrival, Hersher went through the year's schedule. The fellowship gatherings and advancement ceremony would take place as per usual. Then once her explanation was complete, she came straight over to me. Lady Rosemary, did you gather the ingredients necessary to make your library magic tool? She asked. They aren't common by any means, so I was a tad worried. I did. Ferdinand already had them in his workshop. Ah, of course he did. Then my research shall proceed without issue. What a relief. Wait, you were only worried about your research? I knew it! You and Ferdinand are two peas in a pod, like mentor, like student. Once again, my days at the Royal Academy began with me sighing at Hersher. While everyone else desperately studied, I spent my valuable free time before the advancement ceremony in the common room reading the books we'd received from Ehrenfest provinces. Among them were an illustrated version of A Dinner Story, this year's installment of Royal Academy Love Stories, and new volumes of the history of Dunkelfelder. Since the arrangement of my royal adoption, there hadn't been time for me to read anything but documents essential to the various handovers happening back in Ehrenfest. I couldn't remember when I'd last been able to lose myself in a book. It was rejuvenating, as though I just wet my parched throat with a glass of cold water. Ah, this is bliss. I don't feel alive without a book in my hands. Okay. I'll get to work on everything, and I'll see you guys in the next one.